So now we're getting into, now that we've talked about basic bryophytes, very, very basic plants, we're going to get into slightly more advanced plants and talk about vascular tissue. We're going to talk about what gives vascular plants an advantage over the non-vascular plants. How did these guys survive on land? So vascular plants are going to have tissues that provide structural supports. They also provide a way to move water and nutrients through the plant. So now you're not going to be limited by that osmosis that the bryophyte was limited to. Right? All right. Typically, among plants, you're going to see those sporophyte structures, except, of course, in the bryophytes. In the bryophytes, you see the gametophyte. But when you're looking at a tree, what you're looking at is the diploid structure. Typically, the gametophytes are much, much, much smaller and harder to see. What helps trees grow, I kid you not, I have to discuss this with you, are branches. That's right, branches. They allow plants to grow taller and bigger because what do branches do for trees? Why do you have these branches coming out? What does it do? Right, it increases surface area for photosynthesis. Within these stems and within these branches, you'll have what are known as tracheophyte tissues. Tracheids are specialized cells that move water and nutrients, and there are two kinds, xylem and phloem. Why they're called tracheids, how much further I can before I drop that? All right, why they're called tracheids is they have these little perforations through them, these little holes, all through the cell wall. And those holes allow water and nutrients to spill out of them. Do you guys know what a soaker hose is? Have you ever seen one? It's a hose that has lots and lots of little holes in it. So when you put it on the ground, it sprays out in all directions. Now, you don't have a lot of pressure getting to the end of the hose, but as that wherever that hose goes, you get water going all around it. Likewise, these tracheids are pulling water and nutrients up and spreading it out to the cells all around. So it's an efficient means of transporting water throughout the plant. Aside from these tracheid tissues, all vascular plants have three types of tissue: stems, roots, and leaves. Everybody good on that? Awesome. Get this. The stem is made up of xylem and phloem. It's made up of these tracheid tissues taking nutrients out and bringing nutrients in. Phloem is the tracheid tissue that's it allows for the movement of nutrients and water through the plant. The way I think about that is I think phloem and food both start with the F sound. Does that make sense? Phloem is moving nutrients and water through the plant. You'll notice that there are distinct barriers between each cell. So they're moving nutrients through cells and then probably through the plasmodesma between cells. But there's still distinctions between the different cells. Xylem, on the other hand, has lost those cell compartments. So all the cells have fused together to make almost a big, long straw. Xylem helps the plants grow tall. Now, you guys have messed with straws before because you've been bored, right? You're in, like, I don't know, a fast food place, you have a straw. If you put a straw flat, you can squish it down really easily. And you probably do that. My kids get on each other's case all the time because, like, one of them had, like, bit the straw and it's flat now. You know that issue? Okay. You do that? Yeah. But if you go in the other direction, if you apply force from the straw when it's vertical and you push force down, it's hard to push down on it. In fact, you could take a straw and push it through an orange. Actually, you could take a straw and push it through somebody's temple, too. But that's a totally different subject. Don't worry about that. What? Plastic straws can do it, too. Yeah. The more you know. These xylem, because they've got that strength from up, you know, in that one direction, they help the plant grow upward, not necessarily outward. So phloem transports food and water. Xylem's primarily there for structure. Both are going to extend down into the roots. The roots are specialized organs that are going to take up water and nutrients from the soil. Oftentimes, they form a mutualistic relationship with fungi. That's where we talked about endo and ectomycorrhizae. The fungus are going to offer a much larger surface area to the plant, and the plant offers them access to food, sugar. Leaves, of course, are flat. For the most part, leaves are flat. Leaves are very specialized to maximize photosynthesis where they can. These leaves are flat. The reason they're flat is increased surface area. Other leaves, though, are like spikes, like on a conifer plant. If you ever looked at an evergreen, those leaves are really long and thin. The reason that they're actually they're long and fat. The reason they're long and fat is those are pretty much leaves that are just rolled up tight. And they need to survive in the winter, whereas these leaves don't. So leaves that survive through just the summer and spring are going to be flat and wide as possible. Those that survive through winter, you're going to find are much smaller in order to minimize the amount of surface area being exposed to the cold. All of these vascular plants are going to have to minimize the amount of water loss. To do that, they've got 3 adaptations. And this is pretty much definitely on the exam, just this list. 3 adaptations for vascular plant water loss. Wax on the outside, stoma, and the internal conductive tissues. Here's how each works. First, you have that waxy cuticle. You have your epidermis cells secreting wax, and wax, as we mentioned earlier, is hydrophobic. So it's going to push water away from the top, but it's also going to stop water from leaving the cell. You've trapped it. You've created a nice little water cage. The waxy cuticle also prevents pathogens. It stops bugs from being able to drill into the plant and suck out water. In fact, if you've ever seen in a garden your plants start wilting, one reason they wilt is because certain insects have adapted to this wax, and they figured out a way to literally drill through it, poking a hole in it. And then they stick their little proboscis in like a straw and suck out all the juices. There are stoma. Stoma are going to be guard cells that open and close. We talked about these when we talked about photosynthesis last semester. If they open, they'll let in carbon dioxide, let out oxygen, but worse for the plant is they also let out water in a process called transpiration. By remaining closed and by not staying open all the time, they're able to hold more water in. And this is going to be an adaptation you see in especially warm weather plants. Stoma that stay closed more often. And finally, you have internal conductive tissue. By the phloem being on the inside of the plant, that means that that water is not being exposed to external conditions. So water can keep flowing even if it's super hot out and the water would normally evaporate. So those are your 3 adaptations of vascular plants. Internal conductive tissues, stoma that open and close, and waxy cuticle to prevent water loss. This helped them survive in this super dry environment that's not in the ocean.